Hey everyone, Pastor George here. I know that it's a kind of a gloomy day out, and this light is not really going to do me any favors for what I'm talking about. So we were going to go through the Book of Confessions, but one of the things that I just wanted to address is talking about resurrection, death and resurrection specifically, because this past weekend we've had some deaths that were close to the church, and also in the past few weeks we've had situations that have been times of mourning for us. And obviously, in this time, we could see a few more of those, not just, for our church, but maybe just in our extended friend group, family, however you want to talk about it. And I wanted to talk about the resurrection and speak a little bit of words of hope and joy into this situation. So, I want to bring something up that I talked about in a sermon a few weeks ago, but I just mentioned it offhand, and I wanted you all to hear it again because I think it's important. And the reason I think it's important is because we as Christians should have a very different view of death than other people. I think, one of the things that I really appreciate about some atheist thinkers is that they are able to kind of understand that in their worldview, in their mind, that there is no point to living. So this is like Friedrich Nietzsche, Albert Camus, and a few others who are able to kind of say that there is really no point, and that's kind of what this atheistic universe is all about, and we just have to pretend to be happy. I think that's much better than a lot of the ones that are more popular today, like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens and Dan Dennett and their descendants intellectually, who kind of go around pretending that Christian morality is all good and fine, but the beliefs aren't. And I think our society is generally like that, and they're kind of running into a wall now where a lot of people who have lived lives of pretty carefree thinking and not really encountering death are now encountering the possibility of death for the first time. And I'm not talking about older folks. I'm talking about people who are like my generation, maybe a little bit older. We don't have plagues anymore, which is good. I think this is bad. This is not preferable. We don't have wars that kill a lot of people. Also a good thing. But what we miss in that is we kind of believe ourselves to be invincible, and this is teaching us and teaching me that we're not, right? I wish it could be done in a different way, but I'm just trying to think about it. But one of the things I brought up in a sermon a few weeks ago, just to return to my original point, I do have a point where I'm going, is I talked about how there were two different letters that scholars have found from the 2nd century. And the first letter is a letter from a pagan writing to another pagan. And the pagan writes to that person, and she says, I believe it is a she, says, there's not much we can do about death. So it's sad, and you should mourn, but, move on. And they were able to be much more callous about it because people died all the time back then in a way that you probably couldn't be now. But then there was another letter from a Christian living at the same time, and that letter was writing, and it was also from a woman, I believe, and she was writing to a friend whose husband had just died, I believe, or maybe a son or something like that. And she was looking at the words of Paul, who says, we do not grieve like other people who have no hope, right? She was saying that when we carry our dead to a graveyard, we do not do it solemnly or sadly, but we do it joyfully as though we're escorting them from one home to another. And I think that that's the joy of the resurrection that all of us can hope for, that we know that we are not bound and locked to where we are now, that we have a life beyond this one that surpasses any of our understanding. We cannot understand in human terms exactly what that will look like. We have visions from the Bible that maybe teach us a little bit, but generally we don't know too much about what that's going to look like. But we do know that it'll be a world that is not like this one. All the evil and sadness of this world that we are living in right now will be gone. And that's joyful, right? That's something we should be very joyful about. A world where there is no sadness, death, or pain, right? And where Jesus has defeated death entirely. And I want you to think about that and think about how you can tell that to people in this time. If you're someone who's lost anyone recently, or you're grieving any loss, grieve. it's an important thing to do. It's part of how we respond to death in this sinful world that we live in. I'm not saying that you should be exuberantly happy when people die, but there is a time for grief. But we cannot wallow in that grief. We cannot wallow in sadness. We can't wallow in despair, because if we do that, we essentially deny the resurrection of Christ. And when we do that, we forget that God also suffered and died for us. And through that suffering and death, when everything seemed lost, when all hope seemed lost, Jesus Christ broke through that. And that's something that we should especially be mindful of as we head into Easter, right? I believe, this is going to be embarrassing if I'm wrong, but I believe that Palm Sunday is this next Sunday coming up. This is why it's important to check your schedule. And after that, we have Easter, right? And how important then is it that we remember that even the impossible is possible with God. Even someone who is dead, nailed to a cross, can rise from the grave. And in doing so, allow all of us to rise from the grave as well. It's a weird thing to think about, but it brings me such an immense amount of comfort, joy, and peace, knowing that what I do here matters. But if I die today as I drive home from work, right, if I get in a car accident and die, that's sad. But I go and I die knowing that death is not the end, and that this is just a pale reflection of the glories that we will see in the next life. So think about how you can preach that resurrection to people and teach them about Jesus and how much he loves them, right? Because our goal as Christians is to try and get as many other people there with us as we can, and trusting in the mercy and the sovereignty of God to help with that. So I'm sorry that this one may have been a little bit more of a downer. That wasn't my intention, but it's just something that I wanted to say and communicate, because it's something that we need to hear all the time, especially after people have passed away, and it seems like that could be the case going forward. So think about these things, grieve, mourn, wrestle with God, but know that in the end, all of that evil, all of that sadness is swallowed up in the victory of Jesus Christ over the grave. All right? All right, everyone. I will see you tomorrow when we continue our book of Confessions. I pray and hope that all of you are doing well. And don't worry about me. I'm not dying yet, I think. We'll see. Anyway. All right, everyone. Bye-bye.